Whether you're a beginner or pro at drawing or painting, it's always very helpful to understand the art essentials. This includes terms such as composition, proportion, value, depth, color, opacity, and texture. This video is packed with helpful information and will be your one-stop guide for understanding all of the basics that you need to know. If you are familiar with any of my tutorials, you'll often hear me talk a lot about these essential terms. So allow me to now help you gain a greater understanding of what they all mean. In the wonderful world of drawing and painting, composition is the arrangement of visual elements within a work of art. Whether you're working on paper, canvas, or any other surface, the composition acts as the visual skeleton that underpins all of the elements. You can think of it as an architectural blueprint. It provides structure to the painting's layout and influences how the subject is presented. However, composition isn't just about placement. It encompasses the size and interaction of the subjects, any objects or elements, as well as the light and the shadows. This arrangement plays a pivotal role in visual communication by influencing the viewer's emotional response and engagement with the artwork. Here are the two main ways I think composition can work its magic in your artworks. Guiding the viewer's attention. A thoughtfully crafted composition steers the viewer's eye to focal points, the areas where attention is concentrated. These focal points are essential for emphasizing key elements and amplifying your ideas, emotions, or narrative. By directing focus, your intended message becomes clear and impactful. Creating visual harmony. Composition also contributes to the overall visual harmony of a piece. It involves arranging elements in a way that is aesthetically pleasing and coherent, reflecting your artistic voice and style. This harmony is about making intentional choices that resonate with your vision and how you want the audience to perceive your subject or concept. Here we can take a look at some famous artworks to better understand the idea. Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa. This masterpiece is often discussed for its use of the triangular composition. The subject is centered with her hands forming the base of a triangle, leading our gaze up to her mysterious smile. If we were to take the mathematical golden ratio and place it on top of the Mona Lisa, you can see straight away the relationship between the placement of her hands, her face, and especially her smile. Our brains seem to love these balanced ratios, which could explain how the effective composition was able to aid the Mona Lisa in becoming one of the most, if not most, famous paintings, even more than 500 years later after its creation. Other artworks to consider are Vincent van Gogh's Starry Night. Here the composition is characterized by its use of movement and pattern to create a sense of energy and excitement. Van Gogh uses his composition to play around and manipulate the perspective and scale, with the large stars and moon appearing even closer than the distant village below. And this creates a dreamlike, almost surreal feeling. This allowed Van Gogh to capture his unique interpretation of the night sky, and it may also be the first painting to be named after what was painted in the background. And lastly, in Johannes Vermeer's Girl with a Pearl Earring, the large pearl earring serves as a prominent focal point from which the name of the artwork originates from. The use of a single, too large to be real luminous pearl against a dark background adds a sense of mystery and drama to the composition. In conclusion, composition in art goes beyond the arrangement of elements. It sets the scene for storytelling and evoking emotion, allowing you to convey your unique artistic vision. Building on from composition, let's delve into shapes and proportions. In my artistic practice, whether I'm capturing the subtle nuances of a human portrait or the dynamic chaos that comes with a seascape, I view shapes as the fundamental visual building blocks. Proportions, on the other hand, are about the relative sizes and relationships between these blocks. In realistic artworks, accuracy in proportions is a crucial aspect. Even the slightest deviation in a human portrait, for instance, can be immediately obvious. One effective technique I employ to enhance both composition and accuracy is the grid method. By overlaying a grid on a reference photo, the image is divided into smaller, more manageable sections. This breakdown assists in maintaining correct proportions, as each square of the grid is a focused mini canvas, making sure the corresponding area of my drawing or painting matches the reference photo in size and shape. This approach is especially beneficial for tackling complex details. A grid isolates small sections, allowing for concentrated effort on intricate patterns, textures, or facial features, making sure that each part is more easily rendered with precision. Once you have your grid in place for both your reference image and your paper, you can use the confinements of the square walls of each individual section to compare the positions of different features and elements. You can keep checking what specific part of the grid line an element crosses over, or what the distance is of a certain feature between two or more of the square walls. As you can see, this is a very effective way to break down your reference photo into more manageable sections. Scaling is another aspect where the grid method proves invaluable. Working on surfaces larger or smaller than the reference photo, I adjust the grid size to maintain consistent proportions, ensuring that the integrity of the original image is preserved regardless of scale. So as I progress through a drawing or painting, I constantly evaluate the shapes and proportions against each other. Instead of attempting to draw what I think the subject should look like, I instead break down the reference photo into its basic shapes. I refine these shapes by asking critical questions such as, how wide is the gap between these elements, or is this part narrower or broader than that one? This consistent assessment throughout the creation process is key to making sure I produce the reference photo accurately. The significance of shapes and proportions extend beyond realistic art. Even in more abstract or expressive works, manipulating these elements can profoundly influence your artwork. They can play a pivotal role in defining your visual style or conveying your ideas. So whether your preferred style is realistic or abstract, the shapes and proportions of the elements in your work help to not only create balance, but also guide the viewer's eye and convey harmony or tension, enhancing the overall impact of your work. Let's now discuss value and depth. The value in your artwork simply refers to how light or dark something is. It's the fundamental way we can create and manipulate depth and dimension within our artworks. Depth arises when there is a contrast between the dark and light values. For example, when I draw animal fur, I will typically work from a dark value to a light value. To explain, I'll keep everything here black and white to make this as simple as possible. We'll talk about value in colour in a little bit. So my animal portraits typically start with a dark to a mid-tone base layer, and then I will use highlight pencils on top to create the illusion of 3D fur. This illusion arises from the contrast against those darker values, representing the background or the shaded fur underneath, and then the lighter pencil marks in the layers on top represent the hairs coming into the foreground and catching the light. It's this difference from the darker background value and the lighter foreground details value which makes our brain believe that there is real 3D depth and dimension to this 2D image. As the highlights stand out against the darker background, the contrast in their values, how light or dark they are, makes us perceive depth in the image. This is just one example. If we take a look at Rembrandt's The Night Watch, which I recently had the pleasure of seeing in Amsterdam, this painting is considered a masterpiece of dramatic contrasting light which gives it this incredible sense of depth and dimension. The background in this painting is very dark. The figures emerge from this background and start to lighten in value and size as they come forward. And you can see that this happens the most to the two figures at the very front. The contrast between the dark value of the background and then the light value of the subjects causes our brain to perceive the subjects as being in front of the background and not a part of it. This is how a contrast in value conveys a sense of 3D depth and dimension despite the painting being on a 2D canvas. Skillful manipulation of light and dark values can transform a flat canvas or paper into a vivid three-dimensional world. This play of contrast allows artists to create a true sense of depth within their work. Unless you're creating black and white pieces, colour and tone add a whole new dimensionality to your artworks. For example, graphite and charcoal pieces are much more simple as the only values you are required to think of is the light and dark grayscale that we previously discussed. When you add colour into the mixture, you need to think about how light or dark your colour, aka hues, are, and also the tints, shades and tonalities that arise when mixing those colours. Let's take this red colour for example. This pure colour here is the hue. You can also think of this as the pure pigment. When we start to lighten or darken this hue, we start to get a decrease or increase in value, how dark or light it is, and this can affect the colour in different ways. Categorised by three terms, adding in white to your colour and you will start to get different tints of the colour, adding in black to your colour and you'll start to get various shades of your colour, and then adding in neutral greys to your colour, and this will give you different tones of the colour. And as you can see, these all affect the saturation of your hue in different ways. Of course, this is just focusing on changing one colour. As you know, there are many different colours that also come with their own different tints, shades and tones, and these all can be mixed with your hue and combined to form a particular colour that you're looking to use. When we look at a colour wheel, we can see that there are three primary colours from which all of the other colours arise. The primary colours, as you may already know, are red, yellow and blue. Mix these together in various combinations along with black and white, and you can create any colour that you can think of. On a side note, as oil paint mixes very easily, and technically you can achieve any colour from just a red, yellow, blue, black and white paint tube, it's no wonder why it's such a popular choice. For other mediums of art, such as pastels or colour pencil, we rely on pre-made colours that have already been mixed and are ready to use. But again, we can combine and blend multiple different pencil layers together to achieve the particular colour that we're looking for. So let's now have a look at some of these possibilities. What if we mixed our red that's been tinted by a white and mix it with this blue that's been toned down by a neutral grey? Mixing these colours together will achieve this particular colour of purple. I could then change this new colour itself by adding white, black or grey, or I can even add in multiple other colours to change it further. As you can see, the possibilities are endless and I could make a whole separate video on colour theory. But I hope this just explains that when I discuss colour, hue, tint, tone and shade, you now have a better idea of what I'm specifically referring to. Obviously, there is a lot to be discussed here, so if you would like a whole separate video on colour theory, please let me know in the comments if you think that's a video worth me making. Opacity is a simple concept, but it plays a big role in how I create my artworks. Opacity is the opposite of translucent, so if something is made opaque, you will not be able to see through it and whatever is underneath will be covered. I like to think of opacity as being on a scale, ranging from see-through to not see-through at all. For example, if my marks are less opaque, say around the 50% mark, technically you should still be able to see half of what's underneath that mark. So let's take soft pastels for example. When layering, I can affect the opacity by how much pressure I am applying with my sticks or pencils. If I have a layer of colour already down and I wanted to add yellow to it, a hard pressure with my pastel stick will apply a lot of pigment, leaving an opaque, non-see-through layer. The underneath layer of colour will be completely covered. However, if I use a light pressure, the underneath layer should still be slightly visible, and then if I was to mix these colours, the two layers could combine together instead of the underneath layer being completely covered. The same goes for pastel pencils. A lighter pressure will result in a lighter opacity, still slightly revealing what's underneath, and then a harder pressure will result in more opaque marks covering what's underneath. This example only refers to how we can think of opacity with soft pastels, but each different media comes with different properties for how you can think about and use opacity to achieve your visual goals. Oil and acrylic paints are opaque straight out of the tube, but you can use mediums and water respectively to weaken this opacity and make the pigment translucent, depending on how much you dilute the paint. This is also how you can achieve a glaze to alter the tints and tonalities, as it will still allow the layers underneath to show through. Watercolour paint is typically diluted heavily with water, making it fairly translucent and allowing multiple layers to show through and be combined for all sorts of visual effects. So opacity is a scale that ranges from transparent to fully opaque, shaping how the layers interact and blend. Whether using soft pastels with varied pressure or diluting paints, understanding opacity can be key to achieving your desired visual effects. Different forms of mark making in art can enable a wider range of textures, each serving a unique purpose in our visual storytelling. When I mention texture, I'm referring to the visual sensation rather than the tactile experience of physically feeling the artwork. I think it's fascinating, and one of the reasons I love art so much is how our brains perceive the texture of a 2D artwork based on the methods and techniques we employ with our chosen materials. For instance, when you gently blend out a layer of soft pastel with a sponge, or manipulate an oil paint layer with a flat brush, you can create a very soft, even texture. This approach is excellent for crafting smooth gradients, essential for areas like skies or gentle skin tones. These subtle transitions can give a sense of calmness and serenity to your artwork. Conversely, the deliberate lines from pencils or detailed brushes can bring forth rough, hairy, and sharp textures, useful for depicting the ruggedness of a tree bark, the delicate intricacy of animal fur, or the crisp edges of architectural features. Each stroke can add a sense of realism and depth, making the elements in your artwork pop. Texture in art is not just about replicating what we see. In more expressive and abstract artworks, it can convey how we feel about the subject. A rough texture might communicate ruggedness or age, while a smooth texture can convey softness or youth. By mastering these techniques, we can guide our audience's emotional response and deepen their connection to the artwork. Moreover, experimenting with different textures can also be a journey of discovery. Sometimes it's the unexpected combinations of techniques that lead to the most rewarding results. It's about playing with the materials, understanding their properties, and seeing how they interact with each other on your paper or canvas. So in summary, texture in art is a powerful tool because it allows us to create expressive visuals that produce interesting 3D effects and forms. Thanks for sticking around and watching this video, and I hope to see you in the next one soon. If you would like to further your understanding of the artistic practice and put your knowledge and skills to the test, my Patreon channel offers a wide range of in-depth tutorials that guide you from start to finish for creating realistic artworks. You can find the link to my Patreon in the description, or you can also click this icon on the right here to view my full catalogue of the included lessons available right now.